Story 1: The Teeth Beneath Hoya Forest. Luca Popescu had heard the stories since he was a boy. They called it the Bermuda Triangle of Transylvania, a haunted forest where trees grew in twisted shapes, people vanished without a trace, and shadows moved even when the sun stood still. For most, the Hoya Forest was just a ghost tale, something to scare tourists and children. But for Luca, it was more than that. It was personal. His uncle disappeared in the forest 23 years ago. One summer afternoon, he went mushroom hunting and never came back. The police searched for days. Dogs picked up a trail that suddenly stopped in the clearing. No footprints. No signs of struggle. Just a small pocket knife lying in the grass. Luca still had that knife. Now, at 32, Luca returned to Cluj-Napoca after years of living in Germany. He had grown tired of the questions he couldn't answer about his family, his past, and especially the forest that haunted every photo album back home. So when an old friend, Mircea, invited him to a weekend camping trip near the edge of Hoya, Luca didn't hesitate. "I don't want to camp," Luca said. "I want to go in." Mircea raised an eyebrow. "You're serious?" Luca nodded. "Just for a day. I want to see the clearing." They left early in the morning. Mist clung low to the ground as they walked past the wooden warning sign nailed to a crooked tree. "Do not enter. Protected area. No unauthorized access." The deeper they went, the quieter it became. No birds. No wind. Just the sound of their boots over wet leaves and the occasional creak of a branch above. Hoya Baciu wasn't like other forests. The trees were wrong, twisting unnaturally, as if trying to escape the ground. Some bent in spirals. Others curved like bows frozen mid-pull. And then there was the light. Even though the sun was out, the forest felt dim, like it swallowed the daylight before it could touch the ground. After 2 hours, they found the clearing. It was just like the photos, a perfect circle in the middle of the forest where nothing grew. No grass. No trees. Just bare soil, dry and cracked, like something had burned away the life and left a scar behind. Mircea set down his backpack. "You happy now?" Luca didn't answer. He was staring at something near the edge of the circle. A hole. It hadn't been there in the photos. It was small, just big enough to crawl through, and surrounded by disturbed soil, like it had been dug out recently. No tools. No prints. Just black, cold dirt, and a faint, earthy smell that turned sour the closer he got. Mircea crouched beside him. "Looks like an animal den." Luca frowned. "No. Look." He reached into the hole and pulled something out. A tooth. Human. Yellowed. Still rooted. Then another. Then more. A whole handful. 10, maybe 12. No blood, no bone. Just teeth, packed into the soil like seeds waiting to grow. Mircea took a step back. "Luca, put them down." But Luca couldn't. His hand was trembling. The teeth were warm. And from somewhere deep inside the hole, something moved. They didn't sleep that night. After Luca pulled the teeth from the hole, something shifted in the air. The forest grew colder, even though the sun still hung low behind the trees. The wind picked up, but it didn't move the branches. Everything around them stayed still, except the strange stirring beneath the ground. Mircea had begged to leave. Luca didn't answer. He just kept staring at the hole, teeth still in his hand, like they were whispering something only he could hear. Finally, as darkness fell, they pitched their tents near the clearing but kept a fire burning bright between them. Neither man said much. The forest didn't feel empty anymore. Something was watching. Luca woke up just before dawn. Not because of a sound, but because the silence was gone. There was a humming. Low, rhythmic, and deep like a machine buried under earth. It came from the direction of the hole. He unzipped his tent slowly, the cold air biting his face. The fire was out. Mircha's tent was still. No movement. No voice. Luka stepped into the clearing barefoot, eyes fixed on the place where the soil had split. The hole was larger now. Wider. Deeper. Like it had been breathing all night. The edges of the soil were wet, and someone, had dragged their fingers along it. 5 long marks. Claw-like. Human-sized. "Mircha?" Luka whispered. No response. He turned toward Mircha's tent. It was half collapsed. The flap was open. Inside, empty. Luka's breath caught. A trail of dark prints led away from it. Not footprints. Knees. As if someone had been crawling back toward the hole. The humming grew louder. Luka stood at the edge and looked down. For a second, he thought he saw nothing but black. Then, slowly, a shape moved far below. Pale. Slender. Twisting like smoke, but somehow solid. It didn't rise. It waited. It watched. He dropped the teeth. They fell in. And the humming stopped. Later that morning, Luka sat alone on the forest floor. Mircha was gone. No signs of struggle. No screams in the night. Just the memory of fingers in the dirt and a widening hole in the earth. His phone had no signal. He thought about hiking back to town. Getting help. Telling someone. But what would he say? That a forest swallowed his friend without a sound? That he'd held warm human teeth in his hand, dug fresh from the dirt? Luka stood. His legs were shaking. His skin was cold. Then he heard it, a voice. Far away, echoing from the trees. "Luka!" It was Mircha's voice. But wrong. Slow. Hollow. "Come down!" Luka turned toward the hole again. It was wider now. The voice echoed again. Soft. Slow. Almost kind. "Luka!" He should have run. He knew that. Everything in his body screamed at him to get up, turn around, and walk until he reached the edge of the trees, until he saw the sky again. But he didn't. Instead, he stepped closer to the hole. His boots sank into the wet earth. The smell of soil and something sour hit his nose again. He knelt down, staring into the dark tunnel that had opened up like a throat. The forest held its breath. Luka took out the pocket knife from his jacket, the one that belonged to his uncle. He slid it into his pocket and whispered to himself, "Just a quick look. Just far enough to see where it goes." Then he crawled in. Inside the tunnel, everything changed. The air was heavy, warm, and still. No breeze. No noise. No light, except for the small flashlight clipped to Luka's jacket. The tunnel wasn't natural. The walls weren't roots and rock like he expected. They were smooth and curved, as if something large had carved its way through the ground. Every few feet, Luka saw something small sticking from the walls. At first, he thought they were stones. Then he looked closer. Teeth. Hundreds of them. Human. Animal. Old and broken. Some were still white. Others were yellow, black, even fused together like melted wax. They weren't just buried, they were growing from the soil, like fungus. He kept crawling. The tunnel twisted sharply to the left, then opened into a low, round chamber. The ceiling was no more than 2 meters high. Luka stood slowly, brushing dirt from his arms. His flashlight swept across the room. Bones. Dozens of them, all cracked and scattered. Ribs. Arms. Skulls. Small ones. Big ones. Some were ancient and dry. Others looked like they had only been there for a few days. And in the center of the chamber, lying perfectly still, was Mircha. Luca ran to him. "Mircea!" he shouted, grabbing his friend's shoulders. Mircea's eyes opened slowly. They were glazed, unfocused. "Luca," he whispered, his lips cracked. "You shouldn't have come. What happened to you?" Mircea's jaw trembled. "They made me see it." "See what?" A low rumble came from behind the wall. The tunnel itself shook slightly. Dust drifted down from above. Mircea gasped. "It's still hungry." Then the wall behind them moved. A part of it opened. Not like a door. More like the skin of the earth had split apart. Behind it, something pulsed. A shape, pale and wet and massive, pressed against the other side like a giant eye without a lid. Luca couldn't look away. It didn't have a face or a name, but it knew him. The humming started again, louder now, almost musical. The same sound he'd heard in his dreams as a boy when his uncle disappeared. He stepped back, grabbing Mircea by the arm. "We're leaving." But Mircea didn't move. He was shaking. "There's no way out now," he said. "Yes, there is," Luca growled. "Come on." The ground beneath him cracked. A hand, no, a limb, reached up from beneath the bone pile. It looked human, but stretched. The skin was gray. The fingers were long. Too many joints. It grabbed Luca's leg. He screamed. Mircea grabbed the knife from Luca's jacket and slashed down hard. The limb let go with a wet, gurgling shriek. "Go!" Mircea yelled, pushing him toward the tunnel. "Run while it's still distracted." "What about you?" Mircea looked at him with tears in his eyes. "I already fed it once. It won't let me leave again." Luca didn't want to go, but the tunnel was collapsing. The forest wanted him gone. He ran, crawled, slid. Dirt filled his nose. His flashlight flickered, then died. Behind him, he heard the tunnel roar, not with sound, but with pressure, like something massive was breathing just behind his ears. Then, at last, light. He burst through the mouth of the tunnel, coughing and covered in soil. The clearing was silent again. The hole was gone. Just flat earth. Not even a trace of disturbed soil. He never saw Mircea again. No one believed his story. They said he went hiking and came back alone, confused and dehydrated. The search team found no tunnel, no clearing, and no sign of his friend. They blamed trauma, isolation, maybe a fall, maybe a break. But Luca knew. Something lived beneath Hoia Baciu. Something older than the trees. Something that grew its teeth from those it swallowed. And now it had Mircea's voice. Luca hadn't spoken to anyone since he came back from Hoia Baciu. Not the police. Not his mother. Not the reporters who tried to ask about his missing friend. He just told them he got lost, nothing more. No one would believe the truth anyway. But he knew what he saw. He knew what followed him out. The nightmares had started immediately. Every night, he'd wake up with dirt under his fingernails and the taste of blood in his mouth. Sometimes, he would find tiny bite marks on his arms and legs, like something had been chewing on him while he slept. He changed his locks. He stuffed towels under the doors. But still, the humming always found its way in. Low, soft, just like before. 7 days after escaping the forest, he coughed something up. It happened in the shower. He was washing his face when his chest began to tighten. A deep pressure built behind his throat, and he started to gag. Something sharp scraped his tongue. He leaned over the sink and vomited out a tooth, perfectly shaped, still wet. Not his. Luca screamed. He grabbed a flashlight and checked his mouth in the mirror. His teeth were fine. His own were all still there. But this one, this thing on the porcelain sink, it was old. Cracked. Yellow. He recognized it. One of the ones he found in the clearing. That night, he packed a bag, flashlight, knife, notebook. He was going back. Not to save Mircea. Not to find answers. But to end it. But Hoya had already come to him. It started just after midnight. The air in his apartment grew still. His windows fogged from the inside. The lights began to flicker. Then the walls creaked, slowly, like something heavy was pressing against them from all sides. He grabbed his flashlight. It didn't turn on. Then he heard it. A voice from the kitchen. Luca. His knees nearly gave out. He knew that voice. He hadn't heard it in years. Not in dreams. Not in recordings. But clear as day now. Uncle. His uncle's voice. The one who vanished in the forest over 2 decades ago. Come and see. Luca stepped toward the hallway. The floorboards bent under his feet. The air smelled of wet soil and something else, iron. Like blood. He reached the kitchen door and opened it slowly. There was no one there, but the fridge was open. The tiles were wet with muddy footprints. And on the table, a jawbone. Not just bone. Fresh. Bloody. Still twitching slightly. At first, he thought it was from an animal. Then he saw the fillings in one of the molars. The gold crown. It was Mircea's. Then the humming started again. But this time, it came from inside his apartment walls. Luca grabbed his knife and turned to run. But the hallway was gone. In its place was the forest. Dark. Twisted. Silent. The trees were growing through his floorboards. Roots burst from the ceiling. The air turned damp. His apartment was no longer an apartment. It was the clearing. He looked behind him, and the hole was there again. Black. Breathing. Alive. A hand reached up from the soil. It was small. Delicate. A child's. Then another. Then another. Children. Dozens of them. Pale. Silent. Climbing out of the hole one by one. Their eyes hollow. Their mouths sealed shut, stitched with hair and soil. And each of them held a single tooth. They moved toward him without a sound. Luca screamed and ran back toward the door, but there was no door anymore. Just bark. And branches. And teeth hanging from the ceiling like wind chimes. Then he heard the voice again. This time from behind him. Not Mircea. Not his uncle. His own voice. I brought them back. He turned slowly. Standing at the edge of the hole was himself. But wrong. Smiling too wide. Mouth filled with teeth that weren't human. He was humming. Luca tried to speak, but his throat locked. The forest hadn't let him go. It had used him. He didn't escape. He was the opening. Somewhere in the city that night, people began to report a strange humming in their walls. Children woke up with soil in their beds. A woman found teeth growing from her potted plants. And in a quiet apartment near the woods, a man who looked like Luca stood in front of the mirror. Smiling. His teeth still wet. Luca was gone. No one could explain it. His apartment was found sealed from the inside. The front door barricaded. No signs of a break-in. But the place had changed. Neighbors said they hadn't seen him in weeks, but some heard strange music at night. Like humming. Like whispering. Like chewing. Police found no body. Only teeth. A pile of them on the kitchen floor, shaped like a smile. Mira Petrescu didn't believe in curses. She was a researcher. A biologist. Rational. Calm. She'd spent her career studying fungi and root systems in Eastern Europe. When the report came across her desk, plants growing molars in a rooftop greenhouse, she laughed. Until she saw the photos. Then she stopped laughing. She flew to Cluj-Napoca. met with local authorities. Read the files. She learned about the missing hiker, the photographer named Luca, his friend never found, strange soil samples, rumors of the haunted forest, Hoya Bachu. She didn't believe in ghosts, but she did believe in something ancient hiding in the earth, something that could manipulate growth, spread silently, infect systems, even people. She needed proof. So she went to the forest, alone. The trees welcomed her with silence. Even the birds didn't make a sound. She carried her recorder, her camera, her spade. She didn't follow a trail, just the faint electromagnetic readings on her handheld meter. They spiked the closer she got to the center, the same clearing where Luca once knelt. She stepped into it as the sun was going down. The trees arched inward. Dead leaves circled her boots. And in the middle of the clearing, a hole, not wide, just enough for a person to fit, freshly dug. The soil around it was black and wet, like something had bled into it. Mira stood still. Then she took a step closer, pulled out her camera, hit record. Suddenly a noise. Click. Not from the camera, from the trees. She turned slowly. Luca stood at the edge of the clearing, but not the Luca from the police files. This one didn't blink. His eyes were dull, sunken. His skin was gray at the edges, like bark. His mouth smiled too wide. And when he opened it, hundreds of teeth, all facing different directions, all moving. "Don't run," he said, but his voice wasn't his. It echoed like it came from below. "You brought it back," Mira whispered. He nodded. "And it wants to be known." Mira stepped back. "I only study soil," she said. Luca's smile didn't change. "Then study this." He opened his hand. Inside were seeds. Small, pale, and pulsing. "2 seeds," he said. "They grow fast." Mira turned and ran. She didn't stop until she reached her van on the outer road. She didn't sleep that night. She watched the forest from a distance. The trees moved even though there was no wind. Something shifted underneath them. Roots, long and living. The next day, she returned with a full team. But the hole was gone. So was Luca. The clearing had healed over, flat, clean, like nothing ever happened. Weeks passed. Mira brought samples back to her lab. She dissected one of the seeds. It had enamel, nerve endings, a microscopic jaw inside it, alive. The roots they collected pulsed under microscopes. Some were moving on their own. Then, reports came in. A dentist in Germany found a molar growing out of a patient's ear. A family in Ukraine dug up their backyard and found a grinning skull with no eyes, but a root growing from its jaw into the soil. Children in northern Romania started humming the same tune, one their parents never taught them. Mira wrote everything down. Her final report was sent to a private lab in France. She planned to leave the country. That night, she went to bed early. At 3:12 a.m., she woke up gagging, blood on her pillow. She ran to the mirror, opened her mouth. Inside, behind her last bottom molar, a new row of teeth, tiny, white, crowded, and smiling. The thing beneath Hoya Bachu is not a ghost, not a demon. It is a mouth, a god buried sideways beneath Europe's oldest forest. It feeds through us. It spreads through teeth. It remembers every person it swallows. And now it wants to grow. We are the root system, and it is ready to bloom. Story 2, Below the Bones of Patagonia. The cold in Patagonia wasn't just cold. It was ancient. It didn't bite, it seeped. Into your bones. Into your thoughts. Into the places inside you that you thought were safe. Dr. Evelyn Morrow had never feared silence before. As a paleontologist, she craved it. The quiet gave her clarity, space to think. But here, near the edge of the southern ice field, the silence felt wrong. Heavy. Watching. She stood at the edge of the new dig site, boots buried in frost, staring down at the opening her team had uncovered. It wasn't a cave. It was a mouth in the earth, perfectly round. The stone around it was smooth, too smooth, like it had been melted or polished from the inside. And the air coming out of it wasn't just cold. It was wet, thick. It smelled like old iron and rotting wood. And something else. Teeth. They'd been here 2 months. Originally, the mission was simple. Investigate the site where a shepherd claimed to have found bone towers jutting out of a collapsed hillside. Most likely fossilized tree roots or petrified animal remains. But when Evelyn arrived, she realized quickly these weren't bones from any species on record. The bones were curved, serrated, and long. Some stretched over 30 feet and were buried vertically in the earth, as if they had fallen from the sky. But no impact crater existed. No surrounding debris. Just the bones. And the strange sounds at night. That whispering. Too low to understand, but loud enough to make your spine ache. Evelyn's assistant, Diego, climbed up from the pit. "There's more tunnels down there," he said, brushing dirt off his gloves. "It goes deeper than we thought. It's not natural. Some kind of pattern in the walls." She raised an eyebrow. "Carvings?" "No. Like vertebrae." By week 3, the teen had stopped sleeping well. People started hearing things. Evelyn herself would wake up to the sound of bones cracking, like joints popping out of sockets, echoing across the ice. On the 4th week, one of the geologists quit after finding something moving inside a frozen femur the size of a canoe. When Evelyn broke it open, she found strands of black tissue. Still wet. Still pulsing. Impossible. Flesh shouldn't survive millions of years in fossilized bone. But it had. They sent samples to Buenos Aires. The lab never responded. 2 days later, the satellite phone stopped working. No signal. No power. Then, on the 34th night, Diego disappeared. His tent was found zipped from the inside. His boots were still there. So was his parka. But he was gone. The only thing left was a trail of footprints in the snow, walking barefoot straight into the forest. Evelyn followed them for half a mile. They didn't stop. They didn't turn around. But there was something worse. Between every 5th or 6th footprint was a different shape. Longer. Narrower. Clawed. Like something was walking beside him. Evelyn made a choice. She stayed. Not because she was brave. Because she was close. She felt it under her feet now. Like breathing. Like something massive shifting in the earth. The bones weren't buried. They were growing. Regenerating. She saw one push out of the ground at dawn, like a shark's fin cutting through ice. This wasn't a fossil site. It was a body. And it was waking up. She sat in her tent that night, clutching her recorder. Hands shaking. "If anyone finds this," she whispered, "we were wrong. This isn't a discovery. It's a containment breach. We weren't the first to find it. We're the first to open it. The first to hear it." Outside, the wind picked up. But it wasn't howling anymore. It was humming. Deep and slow. Like a lullaby from something too big to see. Then she heard footsteps. Not one set. Dozens. Crunching the snow. Surrounding her tent. And a voice. Low. Dry. Inside her head. "Below the bones, the heart still beats." Evelyn didn't sleep. She sat with her back to the tent wall, flashlight in one hand, a knife in the other. She knew neither would help if whatever was outside decided to come in. But holding them gave her just enough courage to breathe. By sunrise, the footsteps were gone. No tracks. No voices. But the ground felt warmer. The snow around the bone towers had started to melt, forming shallow pools that reflected the pale, colorless sky. She walked among the spires in silence. Some bones hummed when she touched them. Others gave off faint static, like old television screens when you touched the glass. She didn't tell the others. 2 junior team members had already left by helicopter the week before, driven half-mad by dreams of teeth growing inside their skin. Now only 5 remained, and one of them, Diego, was still missing. That afternoon, she returned to the tunnel alone. It yawned open beneath the hillside, ringed with sharp stones and broken ribs that curved like claws toward the center. The entrance had expanded overnight. It was no longer a crawl space. She could stand upright inside now. The rock beneath her boots was slick with frost. But it wasn't rock. It was bone. Smooth, flat, yellow-white, etched with ridges that resembled vertebrae and cartilage. Along the sides, dozens of thin, curved shapes curled outward, like ribs. "This isn't a tunnel," she whispered. "It's a spine." And she was walking through it. Every 10 steps, the air changed. Colder, then warmer, then damp. The smell of minerals gave way to rot, then back to something sterile, like a hospital hallway left untouched for years. Evelyn's flashlight began to flicker. The battery was full, but the light dimmed anyway. She pressed on. Downward. The floor dipped at a shallow angle, curving in a perfect spiral, as if she were being guided. Like the path was waiting. Her recorder buzzed with static. Then, after nearly 20 minutes of silence, a whisper. She stopped. Replayed it. The voice was low, croaking. Words blurred but not random. It repeated, "Return the heart! Return the heart!" She reached the chamber an hour later. A massive hollow buried deep beneath the mountain. And in its center, a shape unlike anything she'd seen before. It floated. Not in water. Not in air. It hung, suspended in darkness by dozens of thin strands of black tissue that reached from the walls like veins. It was a heart. Massive. Rotten. Still beating. Each pulse sent a wave through the bone walls. Each thud echoed with something ancient, primal. Not alive, but not dead either. Beneath the heart was a pile of offerings. Bones. Skulls. Tools. Jewelry. And her stomach turned, a modern backpack. She stepped closer. It was Diego's. Inside were his notebooks, a half-eaten protein bar, and a folded map. She flipped through the pages of his field notes. The last entry was short, scribbled quickly. "They told me where to go. They said I belong here. I saw my mother's face in the walls. She had no eyes. I have to give it back. I have to give it the tooth." Evelyn dropped the book. Her hand brushed against something beneath it. She picked it up. A single tooth. Enormous. Human-shaped, but too long, with a root that twisted like a vine. Warm to the touch. It pulsed faintly, syncing with the heartbeat in the chamber. Suddenly, the heartbeat grew faster. The walls began to shake. The black strands holding the heart tightened, flexed like muscles. And from the far wall of the chamber, something peeled open. Not a door. A lid. A vertical eyelid, stretching 10 feet tall. Inside, a massive, empty socket. Then another. And another. 3 eye sockets. Staring at her. Blind. And the voice returned, inside her mind. "Return the tooth. Feed the eye. We remember the sky. We remember you." Evelyn turned and ran. The tunnel groaned behind her. The heart's beating turned into a roar. Bone walls cracked open like jaws. She didn't look back. Her flashlight went out, but her path was lit by something glowing beneath her feet, veins in the bone, now pulsing red. By the time she burst out into the snow, night had fallen. Her team was gone. Their tent shredded. Equipment destroyed. Only one thing remained. A trail of enormous footprints leading away from the site. Not human. Not animal. Each print was the shape of a hand, but with 6 fingers, and bones sticking out of the knuckles. Somewhere below, the heart beat louder. Evelyn fell to her knees, holding the tooth, knowing she had made a terrible mistake. She hadn't discovered a fossil. She had unearthed a memory. And now, it remembered her name. The storm hit before she could reach the camp. It wasn't snow, at least, not like it was supposed to be. The wind swept in a dense, suffocating fog, full of fine black particles. The air was thick, like breathing through a wet cloth. Evelyn couldn't see the path. She could barely see the ridge where the camp had been. The earth beneath her boots felt different, soft, unnaturally so, as if it were giving way. She stumbled forward, barely able to breathe. Then, the whispers returned. "It remembers you." She froze. It wasn't just the wind. The voice was inside her, as if the words were embedded in the very air around her. She pressed her hands against her ears, but it only made the sound louder. There was something in the fog. A shape. A towering figure moving through the black mist. Too tall. Too wide. Evelyn's heart thudded in her chest. She looked around for a way to escape, but all she could see was the empty white sky, thick and oppressive, and the eyes, 3 massive, blackened orbs, watching from the fog. The creature, or whatever it was, loomed closer. It had no shape, no real form, except for the eyes. Eyes that rolled and shifted like clouds, but with the weight of centuries behind them. The ground began to rumble. Evelyn's legs trembled. She tried to move, but it felt like the very earth had turned to quicksand beneath her feet. Suddenly, she heard something that cut through the fog. The unmistakable sound of footsteps. Not human. Not animal. Thudding, like something massive was stomping through the snow. And then, she felt it, the ground beneath her feet shifting. It wasn't just the storm. It was the heart. The heart beneath the bones. The one that had been breathing. And now it was waking up again. The next few hours blurred together. The storm intensified, trapping Evelyn in a fog so thick she couldn't see more than a foot in front of her. Her thoughts were disjointed. The air around her felt alive, as though it was pressing against her from all sides, suffocating her. She tried to run, but the ground kept shifting. The bones in the earth were moving, like they were stirring beneath the surface. The sky had darkened, but the strange, sickly red glow of the veins in the ground pulsed brighter, illuminating the horizon like a warning. There were more voices now, overlapping with her thoughts, pushing against her consciousness. She couldn't make out all the words, but she heard her name in the murmur. Her real name. They were calling to her. "Remember us. We were here before." Evelyn finally collapsed against a ridge. She was shivering uncontrollably, her mind racing with the terrible truth she was beginning to piece together. This wasn't just a creature. It wasn't just a heart. It was something that had existed before humanity. It had lived in the earth, buried beneath layers of bone and soil, for millions of years. And now, it was waking up. But there was something more, a deeper terror. It remembered her. It knew her. The whispers had said it. And it wasn't just calling her, it was calling everyone. The next morning, there was no storm. But there was something worse. The ground had shifted. The camp was gone, vanished beneath the earth. The tents were swallowed up, the trucks left behind, standing like hollowed-out husks, abandoned. the tools, the samples, all gone. All except one thing. Evelyn found the tooth, the massive, twisted thing that had been left in her hand. She could feel its warmth even now, like it was alive. It had stopped pulsing, but the connection between her and it felt unbreakable. The air was still, too still. The fog had lifted, but the skies were wrong, darker, like something was blocking the sun. And then, from the distance, she saw the silhouette of a figure standing at the top of a ridge. It was tall, too tall, and it was looking straight at her. She ran again, but this time there was no safe haven. The earth wasn't just moving under her feet anymore. It was chasing her. The ground split open in places. Bones, the same bones she'd seen in the dig site, rose from the soil like hands reaching for her. And in the distance, that heartbeat, louder now, closer, thudding like the pulse of the earth itself. By the time she reached the nearest town, Evelyn was no longer alone. The creature was here. Its presence was everywhere. In the wind, in the clouds, beneath the ice. People started disappearing. 3 days later, Evelyn was back at the town's old church, standing on the steps, staring at the mountains. Her mind was a blur. There was no more sleep, no more peace. And that's when she saw it, the first of the eyes. One massive, black pupil reflected in the distant mountains. And it was looking at her. A piece of her remembered. Her memories were blurring, slipping away. The thing beneath Patagonia had awakened. And now, it was coming to collect what it had forgotten. Evelyn hadn't slept for days. The town was falling apart. People were disappearing without a trace, like shadows swept away by the wind. They said it was the storm, but Evelyn knew better. The air felt different now. It hummed with something ancient, something powerful, as though the earth itself was alive and breathing. That night, she stood on the outskirts of town, looking up at the mountains. The mist had receded, but the sky was dark, bruised with an unnatural hue. The sun, or what was left of it, barely cut through the clouds, casting everything in an eerie, sickly light. The footsteps had followed her here. Not human. Not animal. Something else. The heart, the bones, the creature, she couldn't escape it. It had been calling her. And now, it wasn't just in the earth. It was in the sky, in the wind, watching her from the corner of her eye. Then, she saw it again. The eye, the first one. The massive, black orb staring at her from the distance, hidden among the peaks. But this time, it was different. It wasn't just an eye. It was a void, like the dark of space. No pupils. No color. Just a perfect, endless blackness. It was watching her. And it knew her. Evelyn didn't waste any time. She ran. There was no plan anymore. She had tried everything, tried to warn the others, tried to escape, but there was no place to hide. No place where she could be free of it. It was everywhere. By the time she reached the town center, she was gasping for breath, her legs trembling from exhaustion. People were gathered outside the local church, murmuring in fear. Most of them looked confused, disoriented, as though they didn't know why they were there. They were all looking at her. "Evelyn," one of them called. It was Luis, the town sheriff. His face was pale, his eyes wide with panic. "What's happening? We can't leave. We can't." Before he could finish, the ground shook. The sky above them cracked open. A loud, deafening sound, like 1,000 bones snapping at once, filled the air. And then they came. The eyes. Dozens of them. Not just one. Hundreds of massive, black orbs began to appear in the sky. They hung there, unblinking, watching everything below. The earth trembled beneath them, as if the very mountains themselves were alive, moving. Evelyn stumbled backward, feeling the weight of the eyes pressing in on her. She was suffocating under their gaze. Then, a voice, low and resonant, almost whispering in her mind, broke through the chaos. "You are the key, Evelyn. You have unlocked what was sealed." She froze. The voice, it knew her. It wasn't just calling her name anymore. It was telling her something. Something terrible. She wasn't just a witness. She wasn't just a scientist. She was the one who had set it free. The sheriff grabbed her arm, shaking her. "What's going on? What is happening? What have you found?" She couldn't answer. Her mind was racing. The truth she had uncovered, it was too much to bear. She had thought the bones, the fossils, were an ancient mystery, a discovery, an answer to the past. But she had been wrong. She had awakened something. And now it was spreading. "Evelyn," the voice continued, inside her mind, growing clearer. "We are the Ancient Ones. We are the first. We are your ancestors." She gasped. Her head spun. Her ancestors? The truth hit her like a slap across the face. This wasn't a creature buried beneath the earth. This wasn't some forgotten being that had been hiding in the bones of Patagonia. No, the creature was human. Human in a way she had never imagined. A primal, twisted form of humanity that predated all known civilization. The bones she had uncovered were not from an animal. They were from her people, her true ancestors, the ones who had lived in this land long before the first humans ever arrived. It was them who had been sealed beneath the earth, and now they were awakening. The sheriff stumbled backward, his face frozen in terror. "Evelyn, what is happening?" But Evelyn couldn't speak. She was paralyzed. The truth had shattered everything she had believed. And then the terrible thought hit her like a freight train. The heart. The massive, beating heart she had seen in the depths of the tunnel. It was her heart. Or rather, it was the heart of those who had come before her. The original humans who had once ruled this land, who had become twisted, ancient beings beneath the earth. The creature wasn't just waking up. It was reclaiming. It was reclaiming what was always its own. And now, it was calling her to join it. The ground rumbled again. The sky above them seemed to crack open further. The air felt thick, dense with power, as if the very atmosphere were being pulled toward the dark, endless eyes in the sky. And then, in the midst of the chaos, something worse happened. The earth split open. A massive fissure stretched through the town, tearing apart buildings, swallowing entire streets. The eyes above moved closer, growing in number. They were no longer just watching. They were consuming everything in their gaze. And from the depths of the earth, a scream rose. A scream that echoed with the force of 1,000 souls. A scream that felt like it was coming from the heart of the world itself. It was the call of the first, the Ancient Ones. And Evelyn realized, with horror, that they had never been buried in the earth. They had been waiting for her. And now, there would be no escape. The fissure in the earth widened. The sky above was now a swirling mass of black eyes, vast and endless, blinking in unison, as though the universe itself was staring at them, at her. The ground beneath Evelyn's feet trembled with a violent energy that made it feel as though the world was collapsing in on itself. And then she saw them. The first. They rose from the depths of the earth, not as creatures of flesh and bone, but as shadows, enormous, towering figures that seemed to be made of the same bone-white material that had once formed the ancient spires of Patagonia. Their bodies twisted, distorted, like the broken remnants of something far older than humanity, their forms shifting and melting into the air, like living smoke. But it was the eyes, the countless, unblinking eyes, that terrified her the most. They weren't just watching. They were pulling her in. Their gaze was suffocating, filling her mind with ancient memories, with thoughts that weren't her own. Her hand shook as she clutched the tooth that had started this nightmare. It was still warm, still pulsing faintly in her hand, as though it were alive, alive in a way that she wasn't. The sheriff had already disappeared, swallowed up by the chaos. The town was gone. There was no sign of the others, no one left to save. Everyone was either gone or transformed. The first had come for them all, and it had been Evelyn who had unknowingly opened the door. She hadn't just uncovered the bones. She had unleashed them. Now, the air was thick with their presence, with the weight of thousands of years of forgotten knowledge. She stumbled backward, trying to shake the overwhelming flood of voices that echoed in her head. The first spoke in unison, their voices a deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate the very ground beneath her. "You awakened us, Evelyn! You are one of us!" The words seared her mind. They felt like a prophecy, a final truth she couldn't escape. Evelyn's chest tightened as the realization hit her. She hadn't just discovered an ancient, long-forgotten species of humans beneath the earth. She hadn't just found a missing link in the fossil record. No, she had found herself. The first weren't just ancestors from another time. They were her bloodline. The tooth, the heartbeat, the whispers in her mind. It had all been leading to this moment. She wasn't an outsider. She was one of them. Her family, her true family, had been here all along, hidden beneath the earth, locked away from time. And she had unwittingly set them free. The ground beneath her cracked again, and suddenly, she was falling through the earth, through layers of rock, bone, and forgotten soil, as though the world itself was swallowing her whole. She landed in darkness. The air was heavy with the scent of decay. She could hear the distant echo of her own heartbeat, thudding in her chest, but there was something else, something deeper, older. It was the heartbeat of the first, vibrating the very walls around her. Evelyn rose to her feet, trembling, her flashlight flickering in the overwhelming blackness. Her fingers tightened around the tooth, and for a moment, she felt it, a pulse, and with it, an image flashed in her mind. A vision of the first. Twisted, skeletal beings whose faces were indistinct, blurred by time. They had once been human, but now they were something else. Something darker. They had lived before humanity had ever existed, and they had ruled the earth until they had been sealed away. And now they had returned. Evelyn knew what she had to do. There was no escape. There was no fleeing this time. The first were rising, and the world as she knew it was falling apart. She could hear the sound of their massive footsteps, the shaking of the earth, the thunderous roars as they climbed from the depths. But she wasn't just a witness anymore. She wasn't just a scientist. She was part of the awakening. And now, she had a choice to make. She could join them. She could become one of them. The bloodline of the first ran through her veins. She had unlocked their prison. She had brought them back. Or she could stop them. She could find a way to seal them again, to end the terror before it consumed the world. A sudden, violent crash shook the walls. Evelyn staggered, and the air seemed to grow colder. A figure emerged from the shadows, a silhouette tall and looming. It was one of them, the first. But this one was different. It had a face. It was hers. The face before her was her own, twisted and stretched, its eyes hollow black sockets that seemed to reach into her very soul. It smiled, but it wasn't a smile of kindness. It was a smile of recognition. "You are our heir," it said, its voice deep, resonating with power. "We have waited for you, Evelyn. You are the one who will bring us back. You are the one who will make us whole." Evelyn's body trembled. The choice was before her. She could embrace her true nature and become part of the first, to rule the earth once again. Or she could fight, and risk losing everything. Her eyes filled with tears, not from fear, but from the horror of what she had become. She was part of them. She had always been part of him. But she couldn't let the world end. She couldn't let it all burn because of her mistake. With all the strength she could muster, Evelyn lifted the tooth high above her head. "No," she whispered, and she drove it into the earth. The ground shook violently. The heartbeat of the first began to slow, and Evelyn felt a wave of darkness wash over her as the world around her collapsed. The last thing Evelyn saw before the darkness took her was the face of the first, the twisted reflection of herself, fading away into the shadows. Story 3: The Lantern Walkers of Vatma Forest. The village of Noritsk sat on the edge of the Vatma Forest, a dense stretch of ancient pine that the locals had long learned not to speak of after sunset. Tucked in the northern highlands of an old Slavic country, the village was little more than a scatter of wooden homes, icy fields, and winding footpaths swallowed by snow in winter. And every child in Noritsk grew up with the same warning: "If you see lanterns in the woods at night, do not follow them." Mila never believed in ghost stories. She was 23, a biology student from the capital, returning to her grandmother's village after her mother's funeral. It had been over a decade since she'd last seen Noritsk. To her, the place was just another isolated town lost to superstition, clinging to old fears because they had nothing else. She had come to help her grandmother pack up the house and move to the city. A quick trip, a few days at most. But the forest had other plans. It started the second night. Mila had been sitting near the fireplace, flipping through her mother's old journals when she heard it. A bell. Faint. Metallic. Like something swaying gently in the wind. She went to the window. The pine trees loomed in the distance, their black outlines barely visible under a thin fog. But then, through the branches, she saw it. A light. Soft. Flickering. Floating just above the ground. Then another. And another. 3 lanterns, weaving silently between the trees. Mila narrowed her eyes. "Hikers?" she muttered. "At this hour?" She stepped outside, the cold biting at her arms. The night was dead silent. No wind. No crickets. Not even the sound of branches moving. Just her breath fogging in the air and the bells. They rang again, each note clearer now. Closer. She should have gone back inside. But the lights were beautiful. They seemed to move together like dancers, floating without sound. Each one glowed with a strange bluish hue, like fire trapped inside glass. She stepped off the porch. 1 step. Then 2. "Mila!" The voice snapped her back. Her grandmother stood at the door, face pale. "Don't you dare walk toward them." Mila hesitated. "What?" "They're just lights." "They're not lights," her grandmother said firmly. "They're lantern walkers." Later that night, Mila sat by the fire while her grandmother, Luba, poured hot tea into chipped ceramic mugs. Her hands trembled as she spoke. "They only come when the forest is hungry," she whispered. Mila stared at her. "You're serious?" Luba nodded. "People used to vanish. Always at night. Always after the lights appeared. Some say it's the souls of those who got lost, trying to lure others to join them. Others say it's the forest itself, wearing the memories of the dead to trick the living." Mila gave a skeptical laugh. "Grandma, this isn't some old fairy tale." But Luba didn't laugh. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Your mother saw them too, the year before she left this place for good." Mila froze. "She never told me that. She wouldn't. It's not something you talk about. But she told me they followed her for nights, right up to the edge of the village. They never touched her, but she changed after that. She said they whispered her name." Mila felt a chill run up her spine. That night, Mila couldn't sleep. The image of the lanterns haunted her. the way they moved, the stillness of the forest, and those bells, soft and slow, like a lullaby made for something ancient. At 2:17 a.m., she heard them again. The bells. This time closer. She crept to the window, parting the old curtains. There they were. 4 lights this time, drifting through the trees like spirits in procession, slowly approaching the edge of the forest. Not running, not searching, just waiting. For her. The lights didn't move for hours. They hovered just beyond the tree line, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. Mila sat at her window, wrapped in a blanket, heart pounding, unable to look away. There were 5 of them now, soft, blue flames inside glass orbs that never touched the ground. They floated without sway, as though untouched by wind or gravity. The bells had stopped, and still the lights watched. She tried to shake it off. Maybe it was a prank, some weird local tradition. Maybe someone in the village was trying to scare her. But deep down, something told her otherwise. She could feel it in her chest, a quiet dread pressing down on her lungs. When the sky finally began to lighten with dawn, the lights blinked out, one by one, swallowed by the forest. That morning, Mila questioned the villagers. They didn't answer. The old butcher spat on the ground when she mentioned the lights. The schoolteacher just crossed herself and hurried away. Even the priest, who looked like he hadn't slept in days, shook his head. "You are not the first to chase the walkers," he said, "but you will be the next to vanish if you do." Only one person gave her anything, a boy no older than 11. He approached her behind the chapel, shivering in a too-thin coat. "They write names," he said. Mila knelt to his level. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then whispered, "They write your name in the snow. If you see it, they'll come for you." Mila didn't sleep that night. The bells returned just after midnight. The moment she heard them, she grabbed her coat and boots. Her breath fogged as she stepped outside. This time, the lights were closer. Too close. They hovered just beyond the back fence of her grandmother's property, no more than 20 steps away. They flickered like candles in glass jars, only there was no glass, no fire, no fuel. Just cold light. The air around them shimmered slightly, like heat rising off asphalt in summer. But the air was freezing. Mila walked slowly toward the fence. Behind her, the house was dark. Her grandmother hadn't stirred. The whole village seemed silent, buried in a thick stillness that felt more like death than sleep. The bells chimed again, soft, rhythmic. Then she saw it. Carved into the snow just beyond the fence, barely visible beneath a thin dusting of frost, were 3 letters. M-I-L. She stared. Her stomach turned cold. Her fingers trembled. The 4th letter began to form, by itself, as if an invisible finger were dragging through the snow. The letter A appeared, crisp and perfect. Mila. She stumbled back. The closest lantern began to move. Slowly, silently, it drifted toward the fence. The others followed, gliding across the snow like phantoms. And then she heard it. A voice. Not from the forest. From inside her own head. "Come walk with us." She ran. She didn't stop until she was inside the house, locking the door, pulling every curtain shut. She woke her grandmother, who grabbed her by the shoulders and stared into her eyes. "Did they speak to you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mila nodded. Her grandmother's face turned pale. She sat down heavily, as if her body had aged 10 years in an instant. "Then we don't have much time." The next morning, Mila found her grandmother packing a small leather bag. Her hand shook with every fold, every zipper. "I'm taking you to Semyon's Hill," she said. "It's the only place they can't follow." "Grandma, what are you talking about?" Luba didn't look at her. They come for the marked. If they called your name, you're marked now. And you need to hide from them until the forest sleeps again. Mila tried to argue, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the look in her grandmother's eyes, utter, hopeless fear. Maybe it was the sound of the boy's voice echoing in her memory. If you see it, they'll come for you. That night, they left the village before the bells could start. The snow was deep, and the wind had picked up. They took an old sled, the kind used by hunters decades ago, and pushed into the lower edge of the Vatma forest, not toward the lanterns, but away from them. It took hours to reach Simeon's hill. It was just a rise in the woods, covered in dead pine needles and stones. But Luba swore it was safe, that the lanterns couldn't go there, that it was older than they were. They built a small fire and waited for morning. Mila kept watch, and for the first time in 3 nights, she didn't hear bells. But as the fire burned low, she noticed something strange on the tree beside her. A small carving, rough, fresh. She leaned in and traced it with her gloved finger. It was her name. Again. But this time, it was followed by 2 more words. We remember. Mila didn't sleep. She sat near the fire, eyes fixed on the carved message in the bark. We remember. Who remembered? And what did they mean? Her grandmother had fallen asleep, wrapped in furs, murmuring prayers under her breath. Mila had never seen her like this, so afraid, so small. It made her feel strangely alone, like a child again. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Even the usual sounds of owls, wind, and cracking trees were gone. It was as if the world were holding its breath. Mila looked up at the black wall of trees surrounding the hill. They stood tall and still like sentinels watching her. The fire gave off only a dim glow now, its last orange flames flickering low. Then she heard something. Not bells this time. Not whispers. A crunch. Snow being stepped on. She stood, heart pounding. Grandma, she whispered. Wake up! Luba stirred slowly, blinking. What is it? There's someone out there. They both turned to the trees. Nothing moved. But the sound came again, closer. Crunch. Crunch. Then, just beyond the light of the fire, a shape appeared. Not one of the lanterns. A person. Mila grabbed a branch from the fire, holding it like a torch. The shape didn't move. Slowly, carefully, she stepped forward, the firelight licking across bark and snow. Luba grabbed her arm, but Mila shook free. When she reached the edge of the hill, she saw the figure clearly. It was a man, older, maybe in his 60s, with a wild gray beard and eyes so hollow they looked dead. His clothes were shredded, frostbitten, and torn. Yet somehow, he was still alive. I saw your name, he said. His voice cracked like dry wood. They've marked you. Mila held the torch tighter. Who are you? My name doesn't matter anymore, he said. I walked with them once. Long ago. They brought him to the fire. Luba didn't argue. She only stared at him like she knew who he was but was too afraid to speak it. He sat, silent, until Mila offered him some of their tea. His hands trembled as he took it. I was 16, he finally said. They came during a winter just like this. 5 lights. My brother followed them into the woods. He never came back. Mila didn't interrupt. I went after him the next day. Thought maybe he was just lost. But the forest, it doesn't work the same after you see them. It turns inside out. Paths disappear. Trees move. Sounds come from nowhere. Luba spoke then, her voice thin. You're one of the disappeared. He nodded. They don't always take you. Sometimes, they keep you just close enough to break you. Mila felt a chill deeper than cold. What do they want? The man stared into the fire. They were human once. A long time ago. People who walked into the forest during the old winters, when food ran out and the snow never stopped. They died under those trees. But their souls didn't leave. He turned to Mila. They survived by taking names. When you see yours in the snow, it means they've chosen you. They feed on your memory, on your fear. They walk because no one ever brought them peace. A silence settled. Then Mila asked the question burning in her chest. Did they take my mother? The man didn't answer. He just reached into his coat and pulled something out. It was small, wrapped in cloth. Mila took it with shaking hands and slowly unwrapped it. A necklace. A thin silver chain with a broken charm. A little house carved from bone. Her mother's necklace. Mila had seen it in photos. She used to wear it every day. Her throat tightened. Where did you find this? The man looked at her, eyes hollow. At the edge of the tree where they wrote her name. That was years ago. Mila didn't sleep again that night. In the morning, she told her grandmother she was going into the forest. Luba begged her not to. You've seen what happens, she cried. You'll never come back. But Mila's voice was steady. They took her. I need to know what's left. The old man said nothing, but when Mila turned to go, he stood and followed. The journey into the heart of Vatma began at dawn. They left behind the sled and the fire. Mila carried only a backpack, a flashlight, and the necklace. The forest swallowed them quickly. Within an hour, there was no sign of the hill, the village, or even the rising sun. Everything was quiet. The deeper they went, the stranger the woods became. The trees no longer stood straight. They leaned inwards, like they were listening. And the snow turned gray. Around midday, they came upon a clearing. In the center stood an old cabin, half buried in frost. Its roof sagged. Its windows were dark. But something pulled Mila toward it. Something deep and wrong. She stepped inside. Dust. Bone. Cold. On the far wall, names were scratched into the wood. Dozens of them. Some carved with knives. Others burned in by fire. She ran her fingers over them. Her breath caught. There it was. Ludmila Varska, her mother's name. And just below it, freshly scratched in wood so raw it still bled. Mila Varska. Then came the bells. Soft. Slow. From every side. Mila turned. The cabin windows had begun to glow blue. And outside, the forest lit up with lanterns. Dozens. Hundreds. They floated silently around the cabin, drifting between trees, their glow steady and cold. The walkers had found her. Mila stood frozen inside the cabin. The glow from the windows turned bluer, colder, more unnatural by the second. The lanterns outside weren't just watching now. They were closing in. She could see faces inside them, vague, flickering shapes pressed against the inside of the light, like people drowning behind glass. Her flashlight flickered and died. She backed away from the wall, her name still fresh and raw in the wood. The old man, silent this entire time, suddenly grabbed her arm. Don't look at them. Don't speak to them. Just run. But it was too late. The door burst open on its own. A single lantern floated inside. It hovered in the air before her. Inside the glow, something shifted, something human. Then it spoke, not out loud, but directly into Mila's mind. Daughter! The voice was her mother's. Mila felt her knees go weak. She reached out, tears stinging her eyes. Mom? The figure inside the lantern tilted its head. You came. You saw the name. You followed the lights. Where are you? Mila asked. I'm here. I've always been here. The blue light pulsed, and the other lanterns began to press up against the walls of the cabin. The glass cracked. Wood moaned. There is no outside anymore. You're home now. Mila turned to the old man. What do I do? But his face had changed. It was no longer tired, no longer afraid. It was blank. He stared ahead, eyes rolled back, and began whispering something under his breath in a language she didn't recognize. The lanterns pressed closer. The door slammed shut. The windows burst inward. Suddenly, Mila was somewhere else. Not in the cabin. Not in the forest. She stood in a dark, endless place, surrounded by glowing orbs floating in all directions. Faces stared out at her from inside them. Some were crying, others screaming. A few were simply empty. In the center floated the largest lantern of all. Inside it was her mother. She was not whole, not alive, not dead. Her skin was pale, stretched thin across her bones. Her eyes glowed faintly blue. She smiled in a way no living person should. You came to save me, but you can't. Mila shook her head. I don't believe this. You're still in there. Her mother's mouth didn't move, but the voice continued. They made me part of them. I'm only memory now, a whisper inside the flame. But I can bring you peace. Join me. The lantern began to open. Inside, Mila saw not light, but teeth. Dozens. Hundreds. Rows of jagged teeth, spiraling inward like the mouth of something ancient and hungry. She stumbled back, horrified. This was no spirit. This was no soul. This was a feeding thing wearing the face of her mother. The truth hit her all at once. The lantern walkers weren't ghosts. They were predators. They used faces, voices, names. They lured the grieving, the lost, the desperate, anyone with love left to give, and ate what remained of them. Not their bodies, their memories. That's why her mother's name was still fresh. They needed Mila to remember her, to feel her. That's what fed them. Mila turned and ran. She screamed her mother's name, not with love now, but in fury. You're not her! You're not my mother! And for the first time, the lanterns reeled back. The blue light dimmed. The endless dark place cracked and split. She fell. She awoke on the cabin floor, gasping. The old man was gone. The lanterns were gone. Only ashes remained in the corner of the room, shaped like footprints. Outside, it was dawn. The forest was quiet again. Back in the village, Luba sat by the stove, waiting. When Mila walked in, she didn't say anything. Just took her hand and cried. That night, Mila took a knife and carved a name into the tree beside her grandmother's house. Ludmila Varska. Not to summon her, but to remember her, the real her. Not the thing in the flame. But Vatma Forest never forgets. And on some nights, if you walk to the edge of the trees and listen closely, you might hear a soft bell and see a blue light. And if you do, don't say the name, don't follow, don't remember.